Hello all and welcome back. In today's video we will talk about arrays. What are the different types of arrays? How do you store value in an array? How do you retrieve that value from the array? How do you resize the array? How do you erase an array? And so many other things. An array in VBA is a location in memory where you can store at least one value. Think of it as an almirah or a cupboard which has compartments, and each compartment can store a value. Using arrays in your procedure can actually make your code run faster as compared to alternative methods. It also helps you in writing succinct code. For example, let's say you have 5 fruits. How would you store them? You would use 5 variables? Fair enough. What if you had 50 fruits? Would you be using 50 variables? Think about it. So here I would use one array which will hold 50 fruits. This makes our process painless, if I may say so. So let's begin understanding what are arrays. We will now launch the Visual Basic Editor. If you're not sure what Visual Basic Editor is, then I recommend watching the video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. We will now press the shortcut key Alt F11 to launch the Visual Basic Editor. Once the Visual Basic Editor is launched, right click on the VBA project and under Insert, click on Module. Before we begin, let's understand the types of arrays. There are two types, static array and dynamic array. In the static array, the number of elements is fixed. However, in the case of dynamic array, the number of elements is determined at runtime. The main difference is in how they are declared. Let's begin by taking an example for static array. I'm going to declare a procedure called sub1d underscore static array underscore example. An array can be a single dimensional or multi-dimensional. An array made up of rows and columns is called a multi-dimensional array. For example, a 2-dimensional array or 3-dimensional array is a multi-dimensional array. Let's understand single-dimensional static array first. We will declare an array called fruits which will hold, say, 3 fruits. Array in VBA are 0-based. So by default, the array index starts at 0. So to declare the array, we can either type dim fruits open parenthesis 2 close parenthesis as string. Like I said, the array is 0-based, so the first element is 0, the second is 1 and the third is 2. So we will store 3 fruits in this. We can also declare the array by mentioning the lower and upper bounds. For example, dim fruits 1, 2, 3 as string. In this case, the lower bound is 1 and the upper bound is 3, so it will store 3 elements. If you do not want the array to be 0-based or you do not want to specify the minimum value as 1 every time, what you can do is you can mention option base 1 at the very top, just before the procedures. This will ensure that your array is not 0-based. So if you declare, let's say, an array dim fruits 2, that means it will store only 2 elements and not 3 elements. I'm not going to use option base 1 and I'm going to use the 0-based array, and I will use this particular syntax to declare my array. I'm going to delete this. So this fruits array will now store 3 elements, 0, 1 and 2. That would be the index of the fruits array. You can use the Lbound and Ubound to return the lowest and the highest index of the array. The syntax of the Lbound and Ubound is Lbound, array name and dimension. And for Ubound, it is Ubound, array name and the dimension. The Lbound returns the lowest subscript value of the indicated dimension of an array. And similarly, the Ubound returns the highest subscript value for the specified dimension of an array. In such a case, if I typed MSG box Lbound fruits and if I ran this code, I would get 0 as the lowest index. If I had option base 1 mentioned at the top, then the Lbound fruits would have given me 1. So let's test it. To test this, click on the Run Sub User Form button. Alternatively, you can press the shortcut key F5. Now when I run this, I get 0 because the array is 0 based. And if I had option base 1 and if I had run this, I would get 1 as I mentioned. So I'll remove this. Similarly for Ubound, this will return the highest subscript value for the specified dimension of an array, which is 2 in this case. A static array is sized in the dim statement as we did here. Once the array is sized and declared, you cannot change the size or data type, which is this, of the array. So we will now store fruits in the array. You can do that by simply referencing the element of the array using its index number. For example, fruits, the first index is 0, so I will type 0 equal to, and then I'll say apple, then the second index and the third index. So I'll just copy it across 1 and 2. In the second, I will store oranges, and in the third, I will store guava. Similarly, to access the element of the array, you can simply reference the element of the array using its index number. For example, if I want to get oranges, which is at the second index, then I would do it like this. MSG box fruits index is 1, and then if I run this, I get oranges. You can also access the elements of the array using any of the 5 loops that I spoke about in my video, Understanding 5 Loops in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. For this example, we will use the for next loop. So I will declare my counter dim I as long, and then I will say for I equal to Lbound fruits to Ubound fruits next I, and inside that I will use this message box, and in this I will change the hard-coded value to the I counter. Now when I run this, see what happens. Apple, oranges, guava. So I can loop through the array using a for next loop. Similarly, you can use a for each statement. For example, dim fruit as variant, and then I will say for each fruit in fruits message box fruit, and this becomes fruit. Now if I run this, see what happens. Apple, oranges, guava. So you can also use a for each loop. Like I mentioned, you can use any of those 5 loops to loop through the elements of the array. In this example, we used an array of 3 rows and 1 column. This is called a single dimensional array. Like I mentioned, an array made up of rows and columns is called a multi-dimensional array. A 2D array or a 3D array is a multi-dimensional array. So to create an array with more than 1 dimension, use comma to define each separate dimension. VBA array can have a maximum of 60 dimensions. Let's understand multi-dimensional array with an example. A 2D array would be declared as dim fruits 2, 1 as string. Similarly, a 3D array would be declared as 2, 1, 1 as string, and so on. Let's insert a module and copy the code from module 1, and then we will modify it. I'm going to copy this from here. I'm going to insert a new module and I'll paste it. I'll change the name of the module to multi. Now let's change the code to demonstrate how a 2D array is declared and finally how to access its elements. Let's say with the fruit names, I want to store their cost price as well. So this is how I would do it. I would introduce a second dimension and I'll say 1. This means I have an array with 3 rows and 2 columns. And now let's assign values to this array. refer to this image, it will be much more easier to understand how to refer individual elements of the array so that we can assign values to it. So this becomes 0, 0 is equal to apple, and 0, 1 is equal to, let's say, the price 45. Similarly, this becomes 1, 0 is equal to oranges, and 1, 1 is equal to 50. And this becomes 2, 0 is equal to guava, and I'm going to paste this and change this to 2, 1 is equal to 55. And now I will use a for next loop to display the values in this array. So I will change this to dim I as long, and this becomes for I equal to Lbound fruits to Ubound fruits, and next I. Message box, the cost price of ampersand fruits I, 0 ampersand is ampersand fruits I, 1, and we are done. So if we run this, see what happens. The cost price of apple is 45, oranges is 50, and guava is 55. So we were able to loop through the elements of the array by specifying the row index and column index. So this is how a multi-dimensional static array works. Now moving on to a dynamic array. But before we do that, let's understand an important statement, which is the Redim statement. The syntax of the Redim statement is Redim Preserve var name subscripts as type. The Redim statement syntax has these parts: preserve, subscripts, and type. In one of my earlier videos, I had mentioned that in an Excel formula or function, if you see anything enclosed in square brackets, then that argument or keyword is optional. So here, preserve and type are optional. Preserve keyword is used to preserve the data in an existing array when you change the size of the last dimension. If you do not use preserve, then you will lose the previously stored data. Var name is the name of the variable. Subscripts are the dimensions of an array variable. As I mentioned earlier, you can specify up to 60 multiple dimensions. Type is the data type of the variable. If you're not aware what data types are, then do watch my video what are variables, constants, and data types in Microsoft Excel for Windows. Now let's understand what a single dimensional dynamic array is. Let's insert a module. I will declare a procedure called sub 1d underscore dynamic array underscore example. A dynamic array is an array that is not sized in the dim statement like we did in the case of static array. So here we declared the array and we sized the array within the parenthesis. We don't do that in the dynamic array because the sizing happens at runtime. Now let's declare an array just like we did in the static array, but without the dimension. To store values in the array at runtime, we use the redim statement to size the array. The redim statement can be used many times at runtime to resize the array. As I mentioned earlier, a static array is sized in the dim statement. Once the static array is sized and declared, you cannot change the size or the data type of the array. So we cannot use redim to size a static array. And if you try to size a static array, you will get a compile error, array already dimensioned. We can use redim only to size a dynamic array. So coming back to this code, if you do not use redim to resize the array and if you try to access the lowest and the highest subscript value, then you will get a subscript out of range error. So you cannot now say message box Lbound fruits. This will give you an error because the array has not been dimensioned. See? subscript out of range error, and if I click on debug, it highlights this line. It says that this is the offending line. Similarly, you cannot use Ubound. It will give you the same error. So let's go ahead and resize our array by using the Redim keyword. Redim fruits 2. Enter. Like I mentioned earlier, the main difference between a static array and a dynamic array is how they are declared. After that, rest of the operations are the same. So I can actually go back, copy this section from here and paste it here, and the code will work. So if I run this, I will get apple, oranges and guava. A dynamic array can be resized many times during macro execution. So if we use Redim again, see what happens. What I'm going to do is press enter, and here I will copy this statement and I will paste it here. And now I'm going to increase the size and I'll make it 3 so that it can store 4 elements now. And I'm going to copy this again, and I will explain why am I copying this again in a few moments. And now if I say fruits, 3 is equal to grapes. Now if I run this code, see what happens. I get apple, oranges, guava and grapes. Now coming to what I said about copying and pasting it again. Every time you use Redim, you not only redimension the array but also lose the old data stored in it. So if I would have not done this, then see what would have happened. Blank, 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 and then grapes. And hence I had to restore the values in it. So how do we redimension and preserve the old data? As I mentioned earlier, that preserve keyword is used to preserve the data in an existing array when you change the size of the last dimension. Let's understand this by modifying this example. Here I will add the keyword preserve. Now if I do not mention these 3, it is okay. It will work. Apple, oranges, guava and grapes. So we saw 2 things here. To resize a dynamic array, we can use the Redim keyword, and in case we want to preserve the old data, we have to use the preserve keyword. Now moving on to multi-dimensional dynamic array. Let's quickly insert a module. I will declare a procedure called sub multi-d underscore dynamic array underscore example. The declaration remains the same as we did in single dimensional dynamic array. Dim fruits as string. Now let's redim our array and add a new dimension. So I'll say redim fruits 2, 1. And the rest is similar to what we had in multi-dimensional static array. So let's go back there and let's copy that code from there, and we will paste it here. So it's the same after that. So if we run this, we get the cost price of apple is 45, oranges is 50 and guava is 55. So here we see the only difference is how we declare and dimension the array. Just like you redimmed an array in single dimensional dynamic array, you can do that in a multi-dimensional dynamic array as well. So let's do that here. Let's press enter here. Redim fruits. We'll keep the rows as it is, and we will increase the column by 1. So now there are 3 columns. And now let's store the values. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. Let's say the third value that I want to store is the tax rate. So I would say, (2) is equal to 0.18, which is 18%. And then I will copy this and I will paste it here and here as well. And I'm going to change this to 1 and I'm going to change this to 2. Here let's say the tax rate is 15% and here it is 10%. And I'm going to change my message box as the cost price of fruit is this and I'm going to use a line continuation character. The tax rate is ampersand fruits I, 2 multiplied by 100 ampersand percent. Now let's run this. I get the cost price of apple is 45 and the tax rate is 18%. The cost price of oranges is 50 and the tax rate is 15%. And similarly, the cost price of guava is 55 and the tax rate is 10%. Now, if I have to use preserve keyword to preserve my previous values, I need to know one very important thing, and that is only the upper bound of the last dimension can be changed when using preserve. And if you try to change the lower bound of the last dimension, then see what will happen. So if I say Redim Preserve fruits, and instead of 2, now if I make it 3. Now when I run this, see what happens. I get subscript out of range error, and when I click on this, it highlights this line. So like I said, only the upper bound, which is this of the last dimension, can be changed. So I'm going to change this back to 2, and this either keep as 2 or I can make it 3 and it will still work. See, there's no error. Obviously, we did not store anything in the 4th column. That's okay. I just wanted to show you that you can use Redim Preserve. So I'm going to change this back to 2 and I am going to delete these values. So now since we have used preserve, we don't need to specify these values all over again, and the code will still work. So if I run this, see what happens. It works. So I'm going to reiterate the fact once again that only the upper bound of the last dimension can be changed when you are using the preserve keyword. Remember that, it's a very important thing. Now let's understand another important statement, which is the erase statement. The syntax of erase is erase array list, where array list argument is one or more comma delimited array variables to be erased. Let's understand this. I'm going to insert another module. The erase statement behaves differently with static array and dynamic array. In the case of static array, it reinitializes the array and no memory is freed. However, in the case of dynamic array, the storage space in memory is released and you have to use redim in order to use it again after the erase statement is issued. Let's take 2 examples to understand the erase statement in detail. So let's begin with the static array. So I'm going to declare this first procedure as sub erase static array. And then example. And I'm going to copy the code from multi-dimensional static array. So I'm going to copy this code and I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to delete this, we don't need this. Now, before we work with the erase statement, I'm going to type a message box. The dimension of the array is ampersand Lbound fruits ampersand and ampersand Ubound fruits. Let's add value as well to it. So I'll say ampersand and the third element is ampersand guava. So this should show me guava. Now when I run this, see what happens. The dimension of the array is 0 and 2 and the third element is guava. Now let's go ahead and erase the array. And I'm going to copy this all over again. And I'm going to modify the message as the array has been erased and the dimension of the array is Lbound and Ubound and the third element is this element. So let's run this and see what happens. So I get the dimension of the array is 0 and 2 and the third element is guava. I click on OK and the next message is the array has been erased and the dimension of the array is 0 and 2 and the third element is blank. I don't see any value. As I had mentioned earlier, when you use erase on a static array, it just reinitializes the array and no memory is freed. Also, the dimensions of the array remain unaffected. And that is why the Lbound and the Ubound were still 0 and 2, but there was no value in the array. Now let's try and erase a dynamic array. What I'm going to do is I'm going to insert one more module. And I'm going to copy the same code from here and I'm going to paste it here. And I change this to dynamic. Next, I delete this because it's a dynamic array. I don't need this line, and I say redim fruits start parenthesis 2, 1. Rest remains the same. So when I run this, see what happens. The dimension of the array is 0 and 2 and the third element is guava. The moment I press OK, it will erase the array. And when you click on the debug, it highlights this line. And if you take your mouse cursor over Lbound or Ubound or fruits, you will notice that it says suspect out of range error. And that is because erase resets the dimension of the dynamic array. And if you have to reuse the array, you will have to use the redim statement. In the previous examples, I demonstrated how to store values in an array by directly referencing the index number. Now I will show you two more ways to store values in the array using array function and split function. We will cover the array function first. So let's begin by inserting a module. The syntax of array function is array arglist, where the arglist argument is a comma delimited list of values that are assigned to the elements of the array contained within the variant. If no arguments are specified, an array of 0 length is created. I will create a procedure called sub array fn example. I will create a variable called dim fruits as variant. And then I will say fruits equal to array start parenthesis and I'll create my comma delimited list of apple, oranges, and guava, and I'll close the parenthesis and I'm done. And now if I use MSG box Lbound fruits, I will get the lowest subscript. Let's run this. See, 0. Similarly, if I type Ubound, I get 2. So the array has been initialized. To access the array, I can directly say fruits and the relevant index number. If I run this, I get apple. Similarly, 1 will give me oranges. I can use the same loop which I did here. And I have to declare this as dim fruit as variant. And now if I run this, I will be able to loop through all the elements of the array. So we saw how we can store values in an array using the array function. Next, we will use the split function. The split function returns a zero-based one-dimensional array containing a specific number of substrings. Let's insert a new module. And I will call it subsplit fn example. The syntax of the split statement is split expression delimiter limit compare. Here the expression is a string expression containing substrings and delimiters. If expression is a zero length string, then split returns an empty array, that is an array with no elements and no data. The delimiter, which is optional, is a string character used to identify substring limits. And if you omit the delimiter, then the space character is assumed to be the delimiter by default. We will not get too much into the split function now. I will cover this in detail with a lot of examples in one of my future videos. We will use a very basic split function here to store data in an array. So I will declare my array dim fruits as variant, and then I will declare my list of fruits as string, and then I will declare a delim variable to hold my delimiter. Let's assign values to it. Fruit names is equal to double quote apple, comma, oranges, comma, grapes, and double quotes again. Next, we will declare our delimiter. Here we used a comma delimited string, so I'm going to use my delimiter as comma. To store these values in an array, I will have to say fruits is equal to split start parenthesis fruit names comma delimiter, which is delim, and close parenthesis, and I press enter. And now if I type msg box Lbound fruits and run this, it works. It gives me the lower subscript. And if I type msg box fruits and I want to access the second element, and if I run this, it says 0, which is the subscript, and the fruit, which is oranges, the second element. So this works. Here as well, you can use a loop to loop through these fruits. So if I go back here, I'm going to copy this from here and I'm going to paste it here, and at the same time I'm going to declare this as well. And now if you run this, it will loop through all the fruits in the array. So we saw how we can store values in an array using the split function. You can store data into an array in so many other ways. For example, storing values from an Excel range directly into an array. We will not go into too much details right now. We will visit that after we understand the Excel objects. Time for a quick recap. In this video, we spoke about arrays. What are the different types of arrays? How do you store a value in an array? How do you retrieve the value from the array? We also learned how to size the array using Redim and Redim Preserve. We also learned how to erase the array, and not to mention the two functions, the array function and the split function, to store the value in the array. If you still have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can also email me on support@teamexcel.com and I will get back to you within 48 hours. Just a quick reminder, I will be posting 2 videos every week, one on Monday and the other on Thursday. If you like the way I explain things in my video and you would like to extend your support, then go ahead and watch a couple of videos, drop a couple of likes. And if you still have not subscribed to this channel, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel by clicking on the bell icon. And I will see you on Thursday when we touch base with the Excel application object.